Hey guys, it's Friction here, Tank12, having to call me, I don't really care. Welcome back to World of Tanks, where we're today taking a look at the Object 780. This is a Tier 10 Soviet heavy tank, which is designated as a breakthrough heavy vehicle. Yes, this is a reward vehicle. It's not a premium, just so you know. We can actually go into the research tab. It does make bonds, it does get more experience, but it does not receive any credit bonuses. This is a vehicle that was released, I think, back in the year 2022, and it came in either the Caravan event or one of the auctions. I managed to pick myself one of these bad boys up, and yeah, you can see I even got a number, 2,439. This was a very expensive tank, and it has some features that are quite interesting, at least for me personally, and it also has some really, really bad things going for it as well. Let us talk about them in this video, and then hopefully I can give you guys a little bit of an idea if it is worth picking up or if you should stay away from the Object 780. Now, the vehicle was only sold once. I haven't seen it since, but it could be that it might return in the near future. For all of the Soviet heavy tank fanatics, as you can see, I have almost all of the Soviet heavies. There are probably some others that I didn't pick up, which I missed in some kind of also Caravan event. But I think the Object 780 looks by far the most unique. All of them have the same kind of design philosophy. You have the IS-7, you have the Object 277, you have the Object 260, you have the Object 705A. All of them are very long. All of them have like a really weirdly rounded turret and a very big boomstick of at least 130 millimeters. And all of them have, you know, very crazily angled armor at the front. It's very oddly shaped in some in scenarios, just like the Object 780. You can see the lower plate here is basically, it goes down at a very steep angle, and then the upper plate is basically just a flat surface. So that would already tell you that this vehicle might be very strong or have a lot of armor at the front, but it's not the case. The Object 780 is probably one of the vehicles of the Soviet tech tree that you can penetrate more easily than the rest. I think the Object 277 is also quite weak at the front, at least on the lower plate. But I think this one does suffer the most. And usually one of the worst things about this vehicle is that whenever you hit this tank, there is a very high chance that you set it on fire. I even have a video, just a little fun video, just a minute long, where I get set on fire 3 times while playing this vehicle. So let us take a real quick look at the armor, just so you have a little bit of an idea how thick it really is at the front. Now the upper plate, because of the angle, you can see it's basically, yeah, you can forget it. You basically cannot penetrate it, but as soon as you are face-hugging this thing, you can basically just shoot right down into it. You don't really have a problem. Since it's a Soviet heavy tank, it isn't going to have the highest profile, so if you're face-hugging this thing, you can just shoot right down into the upper plate, and yeah, generally, most of the time, you're going to be able to go right through, or you can just shoot right in between the spot where the turret aligns with the hull, and you can have like some very easy shots in here because the armor is only 30 millimeters thick. So yeah, I've been penned by artillery once when artillery fired at me from above, and it hit this spot right here, and it actually did penetrate my tank. So a very unfortunate and very uncomfortable situation. Now also, if this tank is angling a little bit, you can basically just shoot it right here, because there is this side skirt, which is very flat, and there's a very high percentage of you going through. I'm not sure if it has any spaced armor on the side. There is some spaced armor right here, but right there next to the turret, that is actually not a lot of spaced armor. Now, the lower plate, that is a little bit of a troll in certain situations. Now, as you can see, if you go a little bit to the left, if you go a little bit to the right, the armor does get thicker, but as soon as you go to the middle, right here, there's a very easy place where you can pen it. I'm not really sure if it has this It doesn't have the triangle hull that you see on the T-22 medium, for example, at tier 10. You can just basically shoot it right here and you'll go right through. Now, I am looking at, if we have like 260 millimeters of penetration, which most of the players have at tier 10, you can see it's about a 60% chance to go right through. If you hit that plate down here, which is like the only real flat surface, you're gonna have an auto pen. And if you switch it over to APCR and you maybe have 275 millimeters of penetration, you can go through there. Well, actually, it's actually not that. It's actually pretty strong. At least I don't have it in my head to be as strong as it is right now. Because I always get penned in the lower plate, but that's maybe because people are usually using premium rounds. And as you can see, as soon as somebody's using premium rounds, it does get way easier to go right through the lower plate. Now, one thing you also have to keep in mind when you are on a ridgeline, since you're not always going to be driving on a flat surface, when you're raising this vehicle a little bit, players will be able to go right through your lower plate because it's basically flat on. Because it has such a crazy angle. As soon as you're on a ridgeline, a little bit of a hill, you're going to go right through the lower plate. But yeah, let's go into all of the characteristics before we talk any more about the armor. I think it's a very neat looking tank, and it probably was the main reason why I bought it. Now, from the stats, on overall stats, I don't think it's too shabby. It has a 530 alpha gun, so a 130 millimeter gun that does 530 alpha. You do get 3 different shell types. You have AP, APCR, and high explosive. And what you can see right here is that the APCR and AP shells both have some really good shell velocity of 1,130 or 1,480 meters per second. And you get about 267 millimeters of penetration with the AP round, which is fairly good, and 311 with the APCR round, which is okay in my personal opinion. You do not have any heat rounds, which the Object 260 has. So you are going to have, you're going to be suffering the same kind of problem that the IS-7 does face, that you basically have APCR rounds that are just going to be good in certain situations and not allow you to really have the flexibility that you have with the Object 260, the 77, the 277, and the IS-4 or the Object 705A. The high explosive shell is actually not too shabby, 65 millimeters of penetration. I think you can work with that. 930 meters per second shell velocity, that's, I think, the better thing. But generally speaking, I think with this gun, you're going to be having a pretty good time because the rate of fire isn't too shabby. I'm using gun rammer as well. I'm also using a mobility device or turbocharger class 1 to be able to really rush into those places. The gun loading time isn't too bad. As you can see, you have 7 degrees of gun depression, which is better than the IS-7 with 6. It's better than the Object 705A with 5. It's better than the Object 260. It's better than the Object 277. And it's better than the IS-4. So you have the best gun depression out of the Soviet heavies. Aim time is great. Dispersion is great. And you can see DPM is actually pretty good as well if you're using a rammer. 2,757. That is pretty damn nice. I think the IS-7 is about close to it. The Object 277 is a bit better, I think, generally speaking. Also has the better gun, in my humble opinion, because it has the better ammunition type. But generally speaking, you cannot complain too much about the gun that you're getting with this vehicle. Now, the armor, as we've already talked, it's a bit weird, but it also means that the players will realize how to shoot this thing. If you go through the side, if you go right through the tracks, let me show that real fast with the armor again. Let's say you have about 270 millimeters of penetration with AP. You go right through the tracks right here. You're going to penetrate this tank without any problem because basically there is no armor here. There's like no hidden filler armor or spaced armor that we have on the IS-7. There's no spaced armor like on the IS-4. So players will go right through here, and it feels much more like an American heavy tank instead of a Soviet one, because the Americans' side armor is also like usually very weak. So keep that in mind whenever you're playing this thing. It only does work from the front, and as soon as they have the side, it's going to be a bit awkward. Now, the turret armor is fairly thick with 300 millimeters at the front, but you do have this cupola, which is rather prominent. It's a very prominent feature for any of the Soviet vehicles because it's a real cupola that sits on top of the turret, and generally speaking, you can go right through with 200 millimeters of penetration most of the time. Yeah, keep that in mind. That cupola is going to kill you in a couple of times. Now, the side armor of the turret, as we have with all of the Soviets, is actually really good. 200 millimeters thickness, and then the rear is only 60 millimeters thick, and it's actually quite long, and it's very, very flat in certain areas, so keep that in mind, because that here, over in the back, already counts as the rear armor. So if anyone shoots you from the side, you can actually just shoot this part right back here, and it's going to go right through. So yeah, keep that in mind, and then the back is basically free real estate for anyone. But overall, the armor does hold up, especially since you do have some crazy mobility with this thing. As you can see, the specific power to weight ratio is decent. Your top speed is really nice with 53 kph. And then you have the traverse speed, which is okay for a heavy tank with 36.45. So generally speaking, this is a vehicle that will get you from point A to B in a very quick fashion. Concealment and spotting, we don't really have to talk too much about it. This is a Soviet heavy tank. You're not going to be expecting the best view range, but with 410 meters base view range, this is actually really, really good. Wait, that is really confusing. Since when do the Soviet heavies have like 400 base view range? 410 meters base view range is insane. That's the same level as the T110E5, or even better than T110E5, because I think that thing has like 400. Okay, very interesting. Looks like that the base view range on this thing is not too shabby. If you invest a little bit, maybe use premium consumables, you can push it quite a bit. But to be honest, I'm not using the extra combat rations. I'm using the automatic fire extinguisher because this thing does get lit up very, very often. So I recommend to have fire extinguishing as a skill on your 3 crew members, and also to use a premium fire extinguisher because it does get set on fire quite often, and it has happened to me in like, this is the only tank where I got set on fire 3 or 4 times in a single game, and I just knew that this is a tank that I will not be running without a fire extinguisher. Now, moving on to the field modifications. Now, I'm not entirely sure if this is still accurate because I haven't played this vehicle in a little bit of time, but this was the loadout that I chose because for me personally, this was where I got the best results. Yeah, lightweight platform. Either way, there are other guides out there that you can check out if you want to really see. I went with improved hardening because I thought if I already have a survivability tab, I can already use it. This thing does suffer from getting penned very easily from most tanks, so you really need the additional HP in my opinion. And also you go with a gun rammer because you want to improve your DPM. And I think the turbocharger class 1 gives you like a little bit of an edge to be able to go into places that you usually would not be able to go to if you're driving a heavy tank. But since this thing is really fast, it allows you to play very aggressively, and that sometimes means that you're going to be running into situations where you're going to get absolutely wrecked. You can see I've only have a 53% win rate, but I do have the mastery badge. I do have 1 star. I'm not entirely sure what my statistics look like general. 2,700 damage per game on average. 909 experience, 144 games played. Yeah, as you can see, most of the time I lose almost all of my HP. And max damage was 6,717. Yeah, not too shabby. I'd say without further stretching this video too long, let's jump into some gameplays, and then we can talk about how well this tank performs and if it is actually worth picking up in a future auction event or in whatever way Wargaming decides to sell it. Okay guys, for this review we're going to have 3 gameplays. Don't worry, they're not all too long. This one is actually really short. We're gonna get the ugly things out of the way immediately. And then in the second and the third gameplay, we're going to be seeing just how capable this tank really is, especially how great this gun is, and which really doesn't feel like it's a Soviet gun. It's incredibly reliable, and it's probably the main reason why I still play this tank. Other than that, the vehicle's fast, it offers some decent protection, but it has some serious drawbacks whenever it gets penned, and I can show you guys that. I talked about getting set on fire more than once in a single game. That's something that rarely happens with tanks I play. With the Object 780, it's a very normal occurrence, and that is why I highly suggest you to utilize a premium fire consumable. And as you can see right there, our first target, 474 damage. It's a low roll. We roll about 60 damage below the average. But I think, yeah, you can see this tank means business when it shoots other vehicles. And it also has great reload time right there, as you could see. We're not running any premium consumables, which allow us to, have better reload time. You can see how small the dispersion is. So the tank is incredibly accurate for a Soviet vehicle. And also that the dispersion is really, really good if we're turning the tank, if we're moving. So basically ground resistance and everything about this vehicle are great. You could see that the Type 71 did just penetrate our lower plate there. That is something that will happen, especially if you're on a ridgeline like here, where you have a little bit of uneven ground. The lower plate will become a very easy place to penetrate. You can see we're trying to hold the middle here on Pearl River. It's not really working in our favor. First tank we engage up close is the Object 268, and he immediately sets us on fire. Now, this was the second game I played in a very long time, and I did not expect the vehicle to burn up immediately again. And you can see that was the second shot that penned me. The third shot that goes right through me on the lower plate sets me on fire again, and this is basically where I cannot survive any longer. I still bounce like 2 shots because of the weird angling of the armor. The fire does some serious damage to our ammo rack, and we die. But yeah, as you can see, this thing does get set on fire very, very easily, especially right through the front. And that means that you have to be incredibly cautious whenever you're taking this thing out. Utilize fire extinguishers and definitely train your crew to have the firefighting skill. And also, maybe don't be in a place where you're, getting overwhelmed by several tanks. But we didn't know that at the beginning. Either way, that was the very first game. We could already see some positives on the one side with the very good gun, and some negatives with the fire, which is probably the biggest problem with this vehicle. Now, having said that, let's move on to the other 2 replays, and that's where I can really show you what this thing is capable of. The second gameplay I've prepared for you guys is on Airfield. Tier 10 matchup, so no tier 8s, no tier 9s. This is all about what the vehicle is capable of when it is top tier, where it has to really fight against equal tiered opponents. And I think this is also a map where you can really utilize the mobility of this thing if you play the middle. You can see we don't have any medium tanks. Both teams only have 1 light tank. The rest are heavies and tank destroyers. So everyone is going to be less mobile than us, maybe, except for maybe the T100 LT on the enemy team or the IS-7. But other than that, we are going to be the speed kings of this lobby. Now, the very first thing I want you to pay attention to is the very small reticle size. Now, look at this. We're moving. We don't have vertical stabilizer or anything on this vehicle. You can see that the reticle is incredibly small for a Soviet tank when you are traveling and when you're also turning your turret. So the dispersion values on this vehicle are really, really good. Now, the second thing I want you guys to put attention on, or, to focus your attention on, is the fact that this tank actually does have some gun depression. We have 7 degrees of gun depression. That is something that not all or a lot of the Soviet vehicles do have. And having 7 degrees of gun depression really is going to allow us to put some pressure on vehicles that are below us, where we usually would not be able to get a shot on if we were in another Soviet heavy tank and we would have to drop down. The mouse is going to be our main target in just a second, but first we're going to engage that FV4005. And once again, look at that incredible accuracy, look at that very small reticle. It just shows you that this gun is incredibly useful, and this gun is really, really potent. If you're able to shoot your targets, you're going to be doing a lot of damage. Also, having like 267 millimeters of penetration is really good, and at the same time having that 1,130 meters per second shell velocity is also something that you can really appreciate when you're playing this tank. It's not going to be the best Ridgeline Warrior because 7 degrees of gun depression is, in comparison to other vehicles that have 10, maybe 12 degrees of gun depression, nothing, and not really all that valuable. But I think for a Soviet tank, it certainly does come in very, very handy. So far we've done 1,735 damage. The mouse was taken out of the game. He played very aggressively in a position where he knew that I was sitting on top. Not really sure what he was planning on, but with the T110E4 we're able to secure the flank, kill him, and now we can return over and go help our buddies out that are currently fighting a very hard battle in the corner of basically heavy tank alley. Now, one thing you do not want to face in this tank are very hard-hitting tank destroyers that are able to basically go right through your side armor or go right through your lower plate without any issue. Because this thing does not survive a lot. But when it does get shot at the wrong angle and they actually hit the turret instead of the upper plate, which was from that angle certainly very easy to pen, you're going to be able to survive quite a few shots. Now, since this tank is not driven around very often, there is one Object 780 on the enemy team, but I haven't seen them in a very long time. I think a lot of players have forgotten about the weak spot on top, or they have forgotten how to fight this vehicle. So use that as your advantage. When you have an Object 780, go out there, try to fight tanks, because there are going to be other enemies that don't really know how to fight this tank, and it's not all that difficult. They will figure it out eventually as well, but I think this tank really does do very, very well when you use it after a while, when nobody really has seen it for a bit. I don't really see a lot of Object 780s because they didn't sell all that many. They did sell a couple of thousand, certainly, but maybe not all of those players are still playing the game. And you can use that to your advantage. Now, one more thing that we probably have to mark as a weakness is that the APCR shells only have 311 millimeters of penetration. Now, a lot of players would say 311 millimeters of penetration, that doesn't sound all too bad, but keep in mind this is a tier 10 heavy tank that really needs to fight super heavily armored vehicles such as the E3, such as the Mouse, such as the E100, the IS-4s. Now, all of these vehicles, most of the time, have better premium rounds than this thing, and that's just something that you have to get used to. Whenever you're playing the Object 780, you're not going to be the one player with the best premium rounds. And sometimes there are going to be tanks like the Jagdpanzer E100 or the E3. When they are in a hull down position, you're going to have a pretty tough time penetrating their hide. Now, there's one thing I also want to point out. That's why I picked this replay, because we have the high explosive shell, and it only does have 65 millimeters of penetration, but it does do 640 alpha damage. Now, that was a very risky trade with the FV4004. I was just hoping that he was going to not be able to pen us, because we have, I think, on the lower plate about 200 millimeters effective. And if I remember correctly, it was like 230 millimeters or something like that with the hash round. We don't die, we take a little bit of HP, or we lose a bit of HP right there. But we do in turn basically do more damage to him with that high explosive shell than he does to us. Now, the high explosive shell is not too shabby either. I think if you're willing, go run around with high explosive shells, fill up the the third slot with maybe 4 or 5 rounds. I don't think that there are all that many targets at tier 10 where you still can pen them with high explosive, but the FV4005 is certainly one of those prime examples where you can go right through. Now, the armor on this thing is a bit awkward and weird, especially if you're charging someone. Players will panic, and you can see that this Minotaur was not expecting us to go right up into his face and then also, you know, swiveling around. And I have no clue where he hit me, but it must have been the turret somewhere. And yeah, that allows us to get our final kill in the match. 4,821 damage done, with barely losing any HP, only about 700 HP that we lost to the FV and a splash from artillery. So as you can see, this vehicle, it does do fairly well. You also have more than enough ammunition, in my humble opinion. Most of the time, when you hit the targets, you have more than enough ammo, but it's not the same amount of ammo that some other vehicles have. For Soviet tanks, I think it's enough ammo to get you through a round, but there might be a game where you really run out of ammo if you have like one of these awesome games where you can do like 10,000 damage. That could be one of those cases. The reload time is fast enough for you to really be dishing out damage every 11 seconds. And as you could see, the gun is just very phenomenal. It's a very good gun. And overall, I think it's a very, very decent platform, or a good platform that has some certain downsides. But let's go into the final replay where I can really show you how well this tank can get into positions and just how annoying it can be once it is settled in a position where it can really engage several targets at once. I thought for the final replay I would show you what it feels like to be a top tier in a map where you can actually play an aggressive position at the beginning, and when you're going up against tier 8, tier 9, and just some tier 10 opponents. This thing is incredibly powerful when you are in such a scenario, because the gun is so reliable that you basically, you don't really have to worry about landing your shots, and since you have more than enough penetration against most of the tier 8 vehicles and most of the tier 9s, you can basically just hit anywhere and still do damage. Now, we're going to be playing the E3 pocket, and that's a place that you can usually only go to if you have a fast medium tank or a light tank. Heavy tanks, except for the BZ-176 and all the other ones that do have like rocket-propelled assistance, are usually not going to be the ones pushing into this position, except for maybe the AMX-50Bs or, you know, the other faster heavies. But this is a place that you don't want to get stuck on when, you know, tanks appear out of nowhere over here, and you want to be up here as quickly as possible. So right there you can see T-49 comes around the corner. He's a bit late, gets dished 427 damage by us, but we also get hit by a Su-130PM. Now keep in mind, the side armor of this thing is basically nowhere near as good as on the IS-7. But look at the beauty of this gun. Now, that is something that you could not be doing with other Soviet vehicles. Now, I know Soviet vehicles and Russian bias in the sense of you don't have to fully aim in the reticle to be able to hit a tank. But I think this gun is just like, it's on the reliability scale of a German gun. It's on the reliability scale of an American tank. And I think it hits like a Soviet tank, but at the same time, it has the accuracy of a German tank and or an American tank. And that's something that we rarely see in World of Tanks. And that's, I think, the main reason why I think this is such a cool tank. Now, we are playing the west part of the map. So we have kind of left the eastern part by its own, or on its own. And that is going to cost us dearly in a second, because they have a Super Conqueror, they have an IS-7, vehicles that can really do a lot of damage, and that don't really have any tier 10 opponents over there except for the STB-1. They're going to basically get cut down by everything that is on top of the hill as well. But this fight here, if we win this fight and we can open this this entire flank, we can basically put a lot of pressure on the enemy team, because we can always fall back and defend our base from here as well. You can see, first time we're using a premium round to go through the, I think the cupola on the object 7772. The premium rounds, now especially in this matchup, you barely need any premium rounds. The only reason why I load premium rounds is to really go through certain targets where I know I have to do the damage. Now, what is really interesting is that the enemy team is now trying to push us out of this pocket, which is going to be a very big mistake for them. But I first make a mistake myself, and that is not aiming correctly at the object 777, and thus not being able to kill him. But you can see that these three guys, are like really aggressive without any HP. I really want to kill this Type 57, and I do get punished by it, or for it, by the object 777-2. But they still have a tier 10 tank destroyer that we can basically one-shot kill if we land the shot, and we manage to do so right there. The object 268 does try to pen us, but he only hits the tracks if you went right here in this corner, where you can actually set where the hull aligns with the tracks. That's probably the place where you could have killed our tank and taken us out of the game. And now you can see this clear division on the left side of the map and the right side of the map. This object 777 is now the only tank that is kind of in our way for us to, to take care of the middle and then be able to shoot anything that tries to go back to their base. They still have a Mars, they still have a Burask, IS-7, a Centurion Action 10, and a Super Conqueror. So plenty of very dangerous vehicles, and supposedly they're almost at the same amount of HP that we have, but we haven't really seen them in a while, so we don't know if the radio transmission is still the most up-to-date on the HP pool. But what I wanna underline here once again is the incredible reliability of this gun. Now look at the TL7. That TL7 over there, okay, that was badly aimed. That has nothing to do with the gun, but that TL7 is 438 meters away. The gun is immediately like on the target. You barely have to aim at all. The shell velocity is great. The damage potential is great. And you can just see how incredibly reliable this bloody gun is, even at range. And that's one of the things that I think make this tank so goddamn fun to play. 635 damage with a single AP round. Look at that roll. That is something that I would really love to see. The TL7 still there. We knock him out, and now we have an IS-7 trying to head back to the base and hopefully reset, but I don't think he's able to do it. So, should you buy the Object 780? For whom is this tank? Which player really should be looking out for the Object 780? Now, I think the Object 780, from its playstyle, it feels very similar to the IS-7. The IS-7 has better armor potential, in my opinion. The IS-7 has also a very interesting 130mm gun that does a lot of alpha damage, but it doesn't have the same amount of gun handling or the same level of gun handling, but it does have better protection. The IS-7 doesn't get set on fire as much as the Object 780, and overall, I think if you have the IS-7, you don't really need the Object 780. Now, the Object 780, let us just go back real fast so we can take a look at the vehicle before the match ends. So we can really talk about the final verdict here. Now, this Object 780 really is one of those luxury items that players pick up when they want to have a very specific vehicle. Now, I can say that this thing has an incredible 130mm gun that is really fun to play. Overall, the platform is great to play. It's really fast. The loadout I have allows me to be a aggressive breaching tank. But as soon as I do get lit up and people do manage to see me and they hit my lower plate, the tank does suffer quite a lot because the armor is not as reliable as with other Soviet heavies. That does not mean that it's unfair. I think it's perfectly balanced in the sense that if you see this tank, you hit the lower plate, you're most of the time going to pen it. If you see this tank, you shoot the side armor, you're most of the time going to go right through because it doesn't have the same amount of, copious amounts of spaced armor on the side that you have with the IS-7 and the IS-4. Overall, it's a tank that you really need to get used to first when you're coming from other Soviet heavies, because The armor layout is not as efficient as on the IS-7, but it can be really good if you're in the right position. But as soon as you're out of the position, you'll notice that you're going to get penned way more often than on the IS-7. But the gun is so reliable, the gun is so much fun to use, that I just generally think that I'm willing to take the hit. I'm willing to have worse armor for this better gun. But at the same time, if you have an IS-7 and you're a free-to-play player or a player that doesn't have like massive amounts of resources lying around, I would not be willing to go in there and spend about 20 to 30 million credits to buy this thing, because you can have the same thing, just a little bit different on the IS-7. It's the same thing, better armor, the gun is a little bit less reliable, but you also have the mobility, you also have like this really, really good turret, and you also have 130 millimeters of raw power with your gun that doesn't do like 530 alpha, but it does 490, which is still very, very good. And the rate of fire is very similar, the DPM is very similar, and you can also even ram tanks, which the IS-7 can do a little bit better than the Object 7.8. But I think it's a cool tank. It's probably one of those things that, yes, I get why they sold it as like a special kind of vehicle, because it, in my opinion, it does feel special. It does not do anything, it doesn't do everything better than the IS-7. It's not like the Object 279E, it's not like the Chieftain, but it's one of those tanks that is really capable and really fun if you get used to how it plays, and when you give it a chance. And basically that's what I can say. For all the tank collectors, you probably already picked it up, you already own it. For the tank collectors that have missed out on it, well, hopefully it comes around again. But other than that, this is just basically a review for the future, for whenever this tank might come back. And yeah, the Object 780, what an incredible vehicle to play. It's so much fun. Alone the gun itself is so reliable that I'm willing to burn every second or third game. Okay, that was a mouthful, that was a very long video. Hopefully you guys did enjoy, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, have a good one.